Is this the car to break Tesla's dominance of the Australian electric car market? It's called the BYD Seal, and it's not the cheapest, the fastest, or the biggest EV that's gone on sale in 2023, but it may be the most compelling. You see, unlike BYD's other cars that have made a big impact in a short amount of time, the Atto 3 SUV and the Dolphin, which are both price leaders, well, BYD isn't trying to sell this purely on its affordability, but rather its desirability. So, can they? Let's find out. Let's start by talking about design, because electric cars can be a challenge both for established car makers but also newer brands, as they are so dependent on aerodynamics, so they can tend to look either a little bit plain or just plain awkward. But that's not the case with the Seal, which manages to look both sleek and stylish, balancing the need to cut through the air with the need to look appealing. But it's on the inside where it really impresses. In here, there's a real flair to the design, which really stands out when you think about the Seal's closest rival, the Model 3. Unlike Tesla, which has opted for a minimalist to the point of generic design to sort of save cost and complexity, BYD has really lent into the design. They've really added detail. We're testing the Seal Performance, which is the range-topping model, and there really is a great variety of trim. You know, we've got leather, we've got Alcantara, we've got contrasting stitching, we've got these this particular model we're testing has got these really nice seats with this diamond pattern quilting on the seats themselves. Just overall, there's a feeling of quality and, dare I say, premiumness to the Seal. The other obvious design element to the interior that really stands out is this massive 15.6-inch infotainment touchscreen that basically runs all the car's systems. It's a fairly clever and intuitive system. Just, swipes like any sort of tablet. It's basically just a big tablet built into the car. And its big party trick is the ability to rotate 90 degrees, because apparently some people really prefer portrait over landscape. But the frustrating part is there are no manual air conditioning controls. They are sort of here on the bottom of the screen. But again, it's just one of those things in modern car design that personally I struggle with, because it's neither the most convenient nor the safest option. The thoughtfulness to the design has also led to some really great practicality. For example, you've got not one, but two wireless smartphone charging pads at the top here. Underneath, there's another little, there's a very large storage tray underneath. You've got two cup holders, you've got this lidded console box. It all adds up to a very well integrated cabin. And like I said before, the seats, not only do they look good, they're actually quite comfortable and really supportive and hold you in place when you're driving. And just overall, it just feels quite spacious up front, even though it is a fairly low-slung car. It's got a low roofline. It actually feels like, a very roomy car in the front seat, but also in the back. In the back here, this is my own driving position. I haven't adjusted it. I'm about 6 foot, just over 180 centimeters tall, and there is a surprisingly good amount of leg room for what is ultimately a mid-sized sedan. Plenty of knee room, plenty of toe room. It is genuinely quite roomy. The only caveat to that is, because of the sweeping roofline, it does actually eat into a little bit of headspace. We've taken off, it comes with sun covers that we've taken off that have given us a little bit more space, but for taller folk, the rear headroom is probably the only issue. Apart from that, it's actually well equipped. You've got AC vents, you've got cup holders in the fold down armrest, bottle holders in the door, and there's even down here both a USB-A and a USB-C port to keep your devices charged up. So all in all, inside the cabin, pretty practical. As for practical luggage space, well, it's an electric car, so naturally under the bonnet you have got a little storage area because it's this dual motor powertrain. It's not a huge space, but it is a handy amount of extra room if you need to put the charging cable out of the way or just store anything, any sort of loose odds and ends that won't fit in the boot. Speaking of which, let's head back there. As for the boot, well, despite the sweeping roofline, this is most definitely a sedan in the conventional sense. You've got obviously this power operated boot. It's a relatively small opening, but it does give you access to a pretty respectable 450 litres of storage space. So the Seal does tick both boxes of being stylish and practical. Moving on to the question of cost, well, BYD Australia has worked really hard to make sure the Seal is as appealing as possible. So much so, it made just a $50 price adjustment for the top spec performance just 2 days after it made a big flashy public announcement of its pricing in order to meet the threshold for New South Wales and South Australian state government EV rebates. The Dynamic is the entry-level model in the range and will be priced from $49,888. The Premium will start at $58,798, while the Performance all-wheel drive will cost $68,748. That's down $50 from the original asking price. For comparison, the 2024 Tesla Model 3 is priced from $61,900 for the rear-wheel drive version and $71,900 for the all-wheel drive variants. So, BYD has managed to undercut its US rival with each member of the Seal family. If you want more details on the specifications and pricing of the Seal, make sure you read my in-depth written review at carsguide.com.au. Across the three models, there are three different powertrain choices. The Dynamic and Premium are both rear-wheel drive only, but the Performance gets an all-wheel drive layout. BYD claims the Seal Dynamic makes 150 kilowatts and 310 newton meters from its single motor, while the Premium ups those figures to 230 kilowatts and 360 newton meters. The dual motor Performance packs an impressive 390 kilowatt, 670 newton meter punch. Naturally, the three different powertrains return three different 0 to 100 times, what has become the benchmark for EVs for so many people. The Dynamic takes a fairly sedate 7.5 seconds, the Premium drops it to a zippy 5.9 seconds, while the Performance lives up to its name and takes just 3.8 seconds. BYD's true field of expertise is actually battery technology, with the company's Blade battery the centerpiece of all of its electrified models. This compact battery design saves space, which allows for the low-slung Seal sedan shape, but it still provides plenty of driving range. BYD claims WLTP driving ranges of 460 kilometers for the Dynamic, 570 kilometers for the Premium, and 520 kilometers for the Performance. Okay, so that's all the technical stuff we've now covered. But what does that mean? How does that all translate when you get on the road? How does the BYD Seal drive? The answer is surprisingly well. It's a very nice car to drive. And I say surprisingly well because, to be frank, BYD is such a new brand to Australia. The Seal is only the third model it's offered, but crucially, it's the first model it's offered with any sort of dynamic focus. You know, they've really pushed the idea that this is a sports sedan rather than just a efficient electric sedan. And this Performance model really does live up to the name. It is genuinely a quick and sporty car. It's got plenty of punch off the mark. Like I say, it'll do 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. It'll keep going, you keep your foot buried, it hauls along real quick. But what really impresses actually is its handling. This Performance model is fitted with what BYD calls frequency selective damping, or FSD, which it claims provides both sharp handling but also a comfortable ride. And I've got to say, that's not marketing spin from where I'm sitting. It really does feel quite dynamic. If you really push along, you can dial up a sports mode in the drive select system, and it does feel quite sharp. The steering is quite direct. It's obviously, again, got that slight oddity of an electric car being so quiet. It feels a bit strange in that sense. The steering doesn't have the most amount of feedback like you'll get in, say, a BMW M3, but this obviously is a lot less than something like that. So, it turns quite nicely. It feels very direct and responsive in that sense, but equally, it's also quite compliant. The ride is actually quite impressive, particularly on 19-inch alloy wheels. It actually does really soak up bumps quite well. The caveat to having said all that is this is the Performance model we're testing, and the Dynamic and Premium versions of the Seal do not get those fancy dampers, so we'll have to reserve judgment on how those cars perform on the road until we actually get behind the wheel. But in addition to being quite sporty, it's also a very quiet, comfortable and relaxed car to be in when you're just driving around town, with one exception. I can't finish talking about how the Seal drives without discussing its safety features. Now, it's obviously loaded with the kind of active safety features we've come to expect in modern cars. So it's got autonomous emergency braking, it's got lane keeping assist, it's got speed limit recognition warning. The problem is those systems, to be blunt, are just not well calibrated. They are constantly interfering, making noises. Sometimes I just feel like I'm in a computer game or something. There's more beeps and bops than a Super Mario Brothers game. Like, there's constantly changing speed limits, chiming at you. And look, that stuff is annoying. The problem is the lane keeping assist. It's all well and good to keep you in the lane and avoid an accident. That's great. I'm not opposed to safety. The problem with the Seal system is that you can be driving along in a straight line well within the lanes and it will jerk the wheel in your hands, and frankly it just feels unnerving, and it's just not right. It shouldn't be doing that. And it's a system, you know, these systems are great. Having these potentially life-saving systems are fantastic, but if they're so poorly calibrated that, speak of the devil, but if they are so poorly calibrated that they, you know, you find yourself turning them off every time you jump in the car, well then what's the point of having them? Last but by no means least, let's look at the ownership costs of the Seal. For starters, the Seal is backed by a 6-year, 150,000 kilometre vehicle warranty, as well as an extra 8-year, 160,000 kilometre warranty for the battery. Servicing is required every 12 months or 20,000 kilometres, whichever comes first. And while there are limited BYD locations at present, to make life easier for owners, BYD Australia has partnered with the My Car chain of workshops, so you can get your Seal service there if needed. So, what's the final verdict on the Seal? Has the burgeoning Chinese brand built an electric sports sedan capable of blasting past Tesla in the sales race? Well, that's honestly pretty unlikely given the head start Tesla has, but there's really no reason not to consider the Seal. If you're looking for your first electric car, well then it is a pretty compelling proposition. Obviously, you can make the argument that it's cheaper and more affordable than a Model 3. But again, that is only part of the story. Annoying safety systems aside, this Seal is quick, it's quiet, it's dynamic, it's stylish, it's comfortable, and it is good value at the end of the day. All things that make it a very compelling package for an electric vehicle at this time. Now remember, if you want to learn more about the BYD Seal, or any electric car for that matter, make sure you check out our in-depth coverage at carsguide.com.au.